So again, would I recommend this? The Mora Garberg knife. Right now, I would say get a companion.
Alright, hey guys, this is my final conclusion on the Mora Garberg. It's really humid and hot out here today. Hey guys, today I'm going to be doing my final conclusion on the Mora Garberg knife and sheath, but mostly knife. First, I just want to talk a little bit about the sheath. I've had this since December of last year, and I haven't used it like every day, but I've used it as my consistent knife. I haven't gone back to different knives except for like folders I use. But as far as in the woods, if I did any jobs or anything, which is mostly where this knife was used, this is the knife I brought with me. So let's talk a little bit about the sheath. In my first discussion, when I first got this knife, I talked a lot about the multi-mount system.
Will I ever use this setup? Probably not, because I don't really care for it.
And I said I probably wouldn't use it, and I was right. And I don't even actually, all the other straps, the retention strap, ended up filing. This was sharp. It used to be really sharp, and it used to scratch me, so I just filed that and rounded it off. I'd rather have the pommel to smash things. I don't really care if it's sharp. I have the whole spine, which is sharp, so basically once I rounded that off, the retention strap would just slide off, and I mentioned that in my earlier discussion video. So I didn't use the retention strap, I didn't use any of the multi-mount or the Velcro. What I did use, and I came to really like and appreciate, is the sheath, which again goes in either way. So if you're left-handed, right-handed, it doesn't matter. And often I would just leave the belt loop on the belt and take the knife out if I wanted to carry it in a pocket. Now, when I got this in December, it was cold and I had a big winter jacket. Oftentimes, I had a big inside pocket on that jacket, and I would just take it and put it in there and it would be fine. When it got hotter, I didn't have that jacket, I would put it in the belt. So the sheath, I have no problems. The retention is actually a lot better than the companion, and I like the belt loop. No wear really on the belt loop, it's just kind of more flexible since it's been worn. Bumblebee, might be a hornet. Anyway, again, it has the drain holes. No complaints about the sheath. Love the sheath. In fact, if I wanted to use like a companion, I've tried, and you can actually fit the companion. They stay in the sheath, so I actually would probably do that as well. So let's talk about the knife. What did I do? I didn't have any footage of this of use of this knife really. The things I did with it were mainly jobs. There's a guy I know, and I went over to his house to kind of clean up in his woods. We had a storm, and there was lots of trees that fell, and so I had my hatchet and my saws, and we were kind of taking all that stuff apart. And if there was like vines and stuff, I would cut it with this. I did batoning. I actually had a big pine tree in my backyard that fell, and I used an axe mainly to cut it, but when I was actually cutting little chunks of the actual resin, I would put the knife right across the grain and I would hammer it, and I did that many dozens of times. So, and the knife, I haven't sharpened it. The first thing I will correct myself on saying, I did put a more convex edge. It had a micro bevel when I got it, and all I did was a couple passes to kind of convex it down a stone, which I do with all my knives, and that actually made the cutting geometry a lot better. I haven't sharpened it though, really. I haven't had to that was just kind of a little touch-up thing. The knife is still very sharp. The edge retention seems to be actually a lot better than the Sandvik 12C27. Again, this is a Sandvik 14C28N, I believe is what it's called. Yeah, the things I like about the knife. I like the handle. Somebody commented on my discussion video, either before this knife first came out, that they thought the handle was it was just plastic, and that when I got the knife, I commented in my discussion that I didn't really like the handle. And I've looked at comments on other videos and forums and things, and they say just stick with it and kind of let the handle wear in. I do like the handle. What I will say about the handle is this: I wish that it had some rubberized grips. What I would change, I don't know how well you can see this in the camera, it's very bright out here. Like these panels here from like these midsections, you can kind of see how there's a groove in here, a groove in there. I would make those rubber. That on the underside and on the backside, and I would keep the guard plastic, and I would keep everything else plastic except for that, because that's mainly where you're gonna have your grip. Now there is good grip to this knife. You'll notice there's not really much of a guard here. There's a handle, there's a swell, you could say. One thing I would say about the handle is, because it's just plastic and there is no rubberized grip on it, like the Companion series. I was using this in the pouring rain one day, and you could say, well, don't use it in the pouring rain. That's the conditions I was in. And maybe this was me, maybe this was something stupid that I did, but I was using this to cut something. It was pouring rain, so my hands were soaked. The knife was soaked, and I went over to my stump and I stabbed it in like that, because it had good grip, but because I forcefully did that, my hand came all the way down, and I actually cut my pinky finger. It didn't cut it that bad because I could sense that my hand was going past the guard, and I just let go. And that was probably a stupid thing to do. That was an accident. I never had that problem before stabbing. And this is not a tactical knife. But yeah, that's something to be aware of. It is a good handle. I actually like the shape of it. It's very, very comfortable in both grips. This is a very good survival knife. Anyway, so besides that little mishap, continue to use it. And I'm not really blaming the knife for that mishap. I would say if you were going to stab something, maybe you could put the knife onto such thing and then hammer it with that, or have a baton. But just stabbing like that, you can still stab and do stuff like that, but if your hands are constantly wet, you just want to be careful about stuff like that. But that can happen with any knife that doesn't have a sufficient cross guard. I want to talk a little bit about guards on knives, because I actually bought the Gerber strong arm quite a while back, and then I returned it, and I kind of was in favor of this knife. The reason being is when you have it's kind of a give and take, a risk-reward thing. If you have a big guard on your knife, you're not going to be able to do bushcraft as easy. And I've seen, there was a guy on YouTube, and he actually cut the guard off, the top guard off of his strong arm, his Gerber strong arm, and that made it better, and he changed the edge angle to make it a better bushcraft knife. I think that if you really want safety, you'd have a big guard, but if you want a bushcraft knife, something you can really get in close, you're going to sacrifice and just have to be a little more careful. So I'm not blaming, that's not a hit on the knife at all. That is just, and it's not this particular knife. There's tons of knives, even like the Mora number 2 with that wooden handle. I mean, basically his design, it looks like your hand would just go forward, but Cody Lundeen out in the desert has been using that for years. I guess hasn't cut himself with it, so, but that is something about the knife that I thought I'd just mention. As far as the handle, that's pretty much all I'd say. So let's talk about the actual blade. Again, the blade, edge retention, 10 out of 10. It hasn't rusted on me. You can see it's pretty dirty. It had a lot of sap on it, and I actually cleaned it before making this review. And again, I don't have any use footage of the knife. You can find tons of use footage. Mainly the reason I don't have any footage is just because I was working. I couldn't bring a camera to a job I'm doing that I'm getting paid for and set up a bunch of different camera angles. I just didn't really think that was practical and really courteous to the guy who's paying me to work. That would just cost more time. One thing that did happen, I brought this knife into Subway that I do like the belt loop, but it is so flexible. You can sit, it doesn't get in the way. But I had somebody at Subway comment on this knife, and they were like, "Is that a knife?" It's like, "Oh yeah, sorry, I forgot about that." And the girl who was making my sandwich or whatever it was asked to see it, and so I took it out and I showed her. She's like, "Oh, that's cool." So actually, I live in the South, so people, I guess, down here aren't really too affected by knives and stuff. I mean, you could go in. I've seen people with big folders, and they're at the post office flipping out a big folder. It's kind of nice to see that there's people with knives. People aren't too afraid of knives and guns in the South, I guess. Apologies for getting off track. Anyway, the blade again, 10 out of 10. It's stainless. They have a carbon version now. Not sure the steel, what it's called. Again, this is 12C14. No, it was a 1428N Sandvik. The carbon, I'm not sure. It might be like a variation of the 1095. I think the carbon's a little bit cheaper. What I would say about that is I haven't used the carbon, but let's say it's like the same quality as like the Bushcraft Black steel. And it's the same exact the shape and design and everything with this knife. Anyway, we keep having trains come through, so I'll have to edit that out. So yeah, the knife, I would say, it just depends on your environment and your activities, but I would probably say go for the carbon steel. I was given this as a gift for Christmas by my friend, so I'm not going to get rid of it or try to return it. It's a gift, I keep it. And I do like stainless steel because it's low maintenance. The lanyard hole, didn't use really. I tried putting like a lanyard on it to try to chop, but that's kind of, I'm not going to chop with a blade that's the size. I'd rather get a baton. As a survival knife, I would say yes, very good survival knife, as long as you're careful about, like we talked about, not having that big guard. This is like a crossover between a bushcraft knife, which I would not say it's quite really a bushcraft knife, it's more of a survival knife. And I had somebody comment on my earlier discussion video I made that, it's not a bushcraft knife. What do you mean? Basically, all I meant by that is you have all these thinner blades, and not only thinner, but a lot narrower. And me personally, when I do bushcraft and when I make like a spoon or I carve something, just having a narrow and thinner blade, it just makes the world of difference. You could definitely use this for bushcraft. I've used tons of knives. They make big knives for bushcraft. I personally, my opinion is if you really want to do carving and stuff, this might not be quite the knife for you. You probably even want a shorter blade. This is a lot more robust than it needs to be for a bushcraft knife, is all I'm saying. Again, I think this is really good for a survival knife because that is going to be, that big belly is going to be good if you were stuck in a survival situation. You could skin fish with that. And I actually find it's easier to sharpen a belly like that because it has more curvature to it. Whereas like the companions have less belly, so you have to kind of work at it a little bit more with more finesse. My final thoughts. Again, I cut tons of stuff with this in the woods and no problems. There's nothing really, magnificent to say about it. It performed like I thought it would perform for the price. The pommel, I smashed tons of ice with the pommel when we had winter, so our steps froze the next morning and there was ice everywhere. And I took this knife out and beat the crap out of the ice and just destroyed it. And the pommel is pretty much unfazed. So, and the handle also didn't really take any damage. And I did mention in the past that I would like the blade to be a little bit longer. I think Mora should make something like that with the full tang, like make the Pathfinder but have a full tang, or just something a little bit longer. But this is a sufficient blade length. Even for a survival knife, you can get by on that kind of size knife, and you're much more likely to have a knife of this size. So I retract some of that stuff I said. I hope everyone is having a good summer. Yeah, take care. That's the final conclusion of the Mora Garberg. Have a good day, guys.